Welcome to another episode of the Better Leadership Team Show. Whether you are walking, as I love to listen to podcasts when I'm walking, or driving, I do that too, or doing the laundry, or whatever you're doing, welcome back to the show. If you've listened before, thanks for coming back. If you're new to the show, great. Glad you found me. Hopefully, you'll love this and then want to go back and listen to the other episodes. But what I want to talk about in this episode is the importance of building a leadership team bench, the importance of having high performers who are just ready to hit that next level and could be that bench for the leadership team so that when you need to grow that leadership team, when you need to replace somebody on the leadership team, when you need new ideas for the leadership team, you've got folks in your organization ready, willing, able, excited, passionate about sitting around that table on the leadership team. So, how do we find those people? Who are they? How do we get them ready? Really important questions that I find leaders don't spend enough time thinking about. And the impact of not spending enough time thinking about it is you wind up with holes on your leadership team. You wind up at a point where for a long time you've had a VP of sales and marketing that is accountable for both of those functions, sales and marketing. But given the sheer volume of new clients you need to bring in, sales meetings you need to have, new marketing qualified leads that you need, maybe you've come to the realization that sales and marketing are very different things. And you now need both a head of sales and a head of marketing, but you haven't made that move because you don't have the right person. So your poor head of sales and marketing is just stretched way too thin. Maybe you've got somebody on the leadership team who was, perfectly wonderful to get you here, to get you from startup to wherever you are today, but they're not the right person to get you to that next level. But you're not making a move because you don't have anybody that you trust waiting in the wings to take that position. So those are some of the impacts you could have if you don't have a leadership team bench. But the other one is your next level leaders. If they don't see a clear path to sitting around that leadership team table, some of your superstars are going to leave for better opportunities where they've got to have a chance to have more impact on the organization. If you're not bringing new folks onto the leadership team every once in a while, you are also not getting a lot of new ideas, new perspectives on the leadership team. So there are a whole lot of reasons why you need to be thinking about what's next for your leadership team. More importantly, who's next for your leadership team. Now, you can certainly hire from the outside. That is one option, and it's a good option. But what I want to talk about in this episode is how you build a bench of high performers that are ready to take that next level who are already in your company. And I want to talk to you about two different methods of doing that because I think that is the more important challenge. Yes, it's a challenge to go out and find the right new people, but man, if you could find a way to do that kind of succession planning from within the company, provide those opportunities for people within the company, then you're going to get great people to want to stay. Great people are going to attract other great people. And when you promote someone to the leadership team, they're going to be able to hit the ground running much faster because they've already got all that history within the company. They've got those relationships already built within the company. So again, we're going to talk about two different tactics that you can take. And the first one I call the accelerator session. The accelerator session, the way I typically implement it is a once a year, you could absolutely do it twice a year, but it's a once a year or twice a year session that you may want to do kind of middle of the year And then right towards the end of the year, when I say towards the end of the year, the best time to do this is maybe a few weeks or a month before your annual planning process. So if you get together with your leadership team to do annual planning in late November or early December, well, maybe it's late October, early November that you want to do this accelerator session. Then again, you may want to do it mid year. But let me talk about who's involved. What is it? Why do we call it an accelerator session? So, the folks involved in an accelerator session are your next level high potential leaders. They may be that one level below the leadership team, the executive team. If you have a large organization, they may maybe one or two levels below. But you want to gather a group of, depending on how big a company you are, of 5, 10, it may be 25 or 30 high potential individuals, folks who are performing at an A level, folks who you suspect could do more. And you gather those folks together. And the reason why I call it an accelerator session is that the process I'm going to take you through, and this could be half day session or a full day session that you're taking these folks through. The reason I call it an accelerator session is because number one, it accelerates the speed at which you can find out who is ready to take that leap and sit around the leadership table. So it accelerates that process. And also, if you're doing this in October, early November, before your annual planning, and you'll see why I say this, it accelerates your annual planning process, given the information you're going to gather and the discussions you're going to have in this accelerator session. Let's talk about what the topics are in that accelerator session. So you're getting together your 5, 10, 20, 25 high potential leaders, and you're taking them through a number of exercises. Normally, I like to have this facilitated by an outside facilitator. As a coach of leadership teams, I very often do this for my leadership teams. You could certainly use another outside facilitator that's not a coach you work with. You could facilitate it internally, but you'll see why I think you're better off getting someone from the outside. So there are 4 different exercises that I like doing within an accelerator session. And you don't need to use these 4. You may have others, but I like these 4. So if you've got a group of 5 together, you would do these exercises as one group. If you've got, let's say, a group of 20 or 25, you may want to create 4 or 5 groups, subgroups of 5 people to do this. But the outside facilitator or your coach would work with these next high potential leaders, number one, to do a start, stop, keep exercise. Start, stop, keep, you've probably heard of, you may have heard it called start, stop, continue. It is what the name is what it is. So you have that group talk about and then collaborate on as a company, not just for their individual function or department, but as a company, have this group come up with what are 3 things the company is not currently doing that they ought to start doing. And those could be things operationally, it could be things how you market, it could be brand new strategies, it could be how you're hiring people, it could be anything. But what are 3 things that the company should start doing that they're not already doing? That's number 1. So that's the start. Then the stop is what are 3 things the company is doing that they ought to stop doing? What's the company doing that is just not valuable, not adding any real valuable impact to the organization? And these folks saying, we just ought to stop doing that. And then the keep, start, stop, keep, that third part, the keep is what are some things that we're doing today that are really adding value? That, man, if we stopped everything else, man, we got to keep doing these things. And imagine if you've got 10, 15, 20 people in the room and you've got 2, 3, 4 groups of 5 people doing this. They're each coming up with start, stop, keeps, putting it up on flip charts up on the wall, And now they're reviewing it with each other. So if you have a group of 4 or 5, you're going to have one group doing it. If you have a bigger group, the reason why you want to create these breakout groups, these subgroups, is number one, in a group of 15 or 20, everybody's not going to have a voice. So if you've got a group of 10, 15, 20, 25, you want to create smaller groups, number one, so everybody has a voice. And number two, because you're getting a lot more ideas that way. So now imagine you've got 4 flip charts up on the wall with some ideas for start, stop, keep that they are presenting to each other. That's the first exercise, start, stop, keep. The second exercise is a SWOT exercise: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Same idea in those same breakout groups, or as one group if it's a smaller group of folks, is that team is collaborating on and agreeing on what are the top 3 strengths of the organization. Strengths are things that you want to continue to leverage to be great. A strength doesn't mean there's no action we can take on it. There may be actions to continue to leverage it. So, what are the top 3 strengths? What are the top 3 weaknesses that we need to fix? What are the top 3 opportunities that we need to go after? And what are the top 3 threats that we need to protect the company from or protect ourselves from? Again, imagine getting 1, 2, 3, 4 flip charts on the wall with the SWOT, and you're discussing those together amongst those high potential leaders. So, number one exercise is start, stop, keep. Number 2 is the SWOT. Number 3, I call actions to live by. Actions to live by are really about culture. In most organizations, in your organization, you might have a core purpose, a reason why. You might have a set of 3, 4, 5 core values. You have things that anchor your organization, whether it's a big why or whether it's values, which is more of what are the non-negotiable behaviors. Actions to live by are a way of saying, what are some ideas we can come up with to better live our values, to better live our purpose, to better live our culture versus just having beautiful words on a plaque or a website or a poster? So again, those breakout groups, or one group if you've got a small group, is going to come up with 5 or so ideas, very specific ideas for actions to live by, actions to better make sure your culture, what's best, right, most noble about your culture, how do we bring those to life? So those are the actions to live by. So far we've got flip charts postering a big part of the room you're in, or virtually, with start, stop, keep, SWOT, and actions to live by exercises. The fourth and last exercise that I normally do is a top priorities exercise. So imagine you're doing this near the end of the year. You would do top priorities for the next year. If you're doing it mid-year, you might do top priorities for the remaining 6 months of the year. But again, you're getting each of these groups to collaborate, debate on what do they believe are the top 3 priorities for the next year or for the remainder of the year. Those are all flip charts around the room. So you now have the room or your virtual room plastered with flip charts that have the start, stop, keep exercise, the SWOT exercise, actions to live by, and top priorities, all of the best thinking from your most high potential leaders. Now, here's a wonderful next step. You could leave it at that, and it would add incredible value. But the next step is critical. So, what I do when I facilitate this as the coach, I then make sure that when we're done with those 4 exercises, that the leadership team, who is not in the room, by the way, for any of these exercises, I make sure that the leadership team is waiting in the wings to then, after probably a little break, the leadership team comes in with notepads, and they are walking the room, reading what's on all of these different flip charts, taking notes on ideas they love, ideas they hate, questions that they have for the group. I then have for each of the exercises, someone from each of the subgroups of the breakout groups present to the leadership team the findings of their group. And I try amongst the 4 different exercises to have 4 different people from each group presenting. So everybody in the group gets a chance to take a leadership role, or most people in the group get a chance to take a leadership role and show their stuff, present to the leadership team. The leadership team first listens, takes notes, and then they're asking questions. And anybody in the group could answer the questions, but they're now asking questions. And not only is that just a wonderful information gathering session for the leaders, unbelievable information to help them plan moving forward, you are seeing amongst all those high potential leaders who's really taking the lead. How did they present? Who's answering the questions? How are they answering the questions? Are they getting defensive? All of those things, great information gathering, unbelievable chance to learn from this group. Like I said, that can take, depending on how you do it, take a half day, take a full day. When I've done it as a coach, I've incorporated some learning exercises for that high potential group as well, which makes it a full day. If you're just doing the exercises, you may get away with a half a day. And again, that information is great feedback back for the leadership team. It is a great accelerator to annual planning or second half planning. And it's also just incredible information that helps you pinpoint who in that high potential group really might be ready to take the next level. And by the way, one of the important wrap up pieces of it is make sure in some way, shape, or form, you're getting back to those folks. You don't have to commit in that session what, as a company, you're going to go implement. These are not simple things. You're going to want to go back and discuss it as a leadership team. But if you never get back to those high potential leaders and don't implement much of what they've recommended, they're not going to be so excited to try to add value the next time. So in some way, shape, or form, you may want to get that group back together and say, hey, we really appreciate all this. Here are the things we're going to implement. Here are the things we're not able to implement right now. Here are the things we're thinking about for the future. And here's some help we may need from you moving forward. So that's number 1 strategy, is the accelerator session. Second strategy I want to talk about, which I actually just had a client do, and I know it's going to work out real well for them, but they just made the decision 2 weeks ago, is to create what I call a M.A.R.S team, M.A.R.S, like the planet Mars, to create a M.A.R.S team in the organization of next level high potential leaders. And the job of the M.A.R.S team is to make sure that as a company, you are living the culture, living purpose, living values, similar to one of the exercises we just did, the actions to live by within the accelerator session. But the M.A.R.S team is a team that is together frequently. It's not a one-time thing. Now, why do we call it a M.A.R.S team? Well, one of the ways that I have my clients discover what their core values are is to do something called a M.A.R.S exercise, which I described. There's an earlier episode about core values where I described the exercise. It's not my exercise. It was developed by Jim Collins, and I believe it was in Good to Great. And to summarize it, it's just a way to discover your core values by saying, if you had to send 5 of your team members to another planet, to Mars, to help the Martians better understand what's best, right, most noble about your culture, who would you send and why? So you wind up picking your kind of best, the best examples of what's great about your culture. Those are those people. Well, I have the entire leadership team do it. So each member of the leadership team may pick a different 5 people. The reason I call this a Mars team is because the people you pick for this team, and it could be 5 people, it could be 10 people, a little bit more, probably not much less. But the people you pick for this Mars team are some of those same people, the people who represent who you are, who you want to continue to be when you are doing your best culturally. So that's how you select people from the team. There's also typically someone from the leadership team who champions that team, who's involved making sure they are helping that team stay on track, guide them, knock obstacles out of the way of them implementing things. Because what you want is you want this team getting together. It may be monthly, it may be every other week. Quarterly is probably not enough, but let's assume monthly. This team may get together monthly for the sheer purpose of brainstorming ideas on, again, how to make sure that as a company, you are defining and living your culture at a higher and higher level. Now, when I talk about culture, I define it as the 3 V's: values. What are those non negotiable behaviors? Those are your values. Vision. How do we make sure everybody has a crystal clear view of where you're going from core purpose, which is your why, to your 10 to 15-year big, hairy, audacious goal? So there's values, vision, and then vulnerability. What could we do to make sure we're having open, honest, safe conversations and debates as an organization? So the job of the Mars team is to get together with a level of frequency and say, what could we do as a company to improve those 3 V's, to better live the purpose, to better live the values, vulnerability, all those things? And there are certain things within that Mars team that you want to give them authority to just go do, where they don't have to ask for permission. I remember in the first client I had do this company in Michigan, actually plastic surgery company in Michigan, and they got the Mars team together. The Mars team had their first meeting, and the next day the leaders came into the office. They had 5 core values, and as they walked up the stairs to the entry area, on each step they had put these really cool stickers, of lettered stickers with the names of each of the core values. So every time people walked into the office, they would see those core values. Something like that you could do without any permission. I had another client, a client based in New York City, whose Mars team decided to create this awesome video where they interviewed about 10 different people. Again, they had, I think, five core values. So they interviewed 2 people per core value, and the interviews were people thanking others within the organization for living a core value. So it was a great way to thank people, great way to help people learn a little bit more about what the core values are, what they call the core values aren't. Again, those are 2 things that required no permission. They just went and did it, and it was phenomenal. There may be other things that do require some approval if we want to go and change actually how we're defining what the core values are. If there are core values, pats on the back that you want to make sure the CEO is giving during a town hall, just imagine these are folks within the organization that are not senior leaders who are driven to make sure you are living the culture that you've defined at the highest level. And that culture is not only lived, but of course, understood by everybody in the organization. And then what I've seen work pretty well is periodically you rotate people in and out of that Mars team. There may be even be certain challenges that you have. I have a company right now that has recently had some retention challenges. So they are tasking the Mars team to find out a little bit more about what is causing that, about morale, and come up with some ideas to improve retention. And these folks are a lot closer to the front lines. So they're going to get better information. And remember, I started all this out saying this is about building that leadership team bench. And yes, from the accelerator session, from the M.A.R.S team, there is so much great productive discussion and action coming out of that. But a benefit of all of this is you are giving people the chance to begin acting like senior leaders before they're actually sitting around that leadership table. There are a whole lot of additional ideas that I'm sure you can come up with to build that leadership team bench. But hey, I love the accelerator session. I love the idea of the M.A.R.S team. Come up with your own, but question I want you to ask yourself and the rest of the folks on your team is, what are we doing? What are we doing to build that next generation of leaders, the next folks sitting around this leadership table? What are we doing? What is it that we should be doing that we aren't doing? Anyway, hope that helps. Thanks for listening. Look forward to seeing you or hearing you. Actually, I don't hear you and I don't see you. I look forward to you hearing me and or seeing me on the next episode. Take care.